But let's back it up and see how we got here. Quick video. I want to show this video real quick in the defense that I played. This defense that I set up that I didn't even know I was setting up. It just happened. So they're going to move their piece. They're the white. They move their piece out. I'm going to match that, moving my piece to the center of the board. All right. I'm working on controlling the center of the board because that's something that I learned watching chess, that, hey, control the center of the board, you dominate the board, you dominate the game. It's their move. They go ahead and move their knight out. I'm going to move my knight out as well. We're both threatening each other's pawn, and we're going to go ahead and swap for pawn for pawn. So boom, they take my pawn, I take theirs. All right, we're in the middle of the board. They're going to move their queen out, basically threatening to take my knight. So what I do, I elected to push my pawn up instead of putting my queen there, because if I put my queen there, they would have been basically a move ahead, and I don't want to be a move behind where I don't want to waste a move. I want to set my moves up correctly. So I push my pawn up instead of putting my queen there first, because if I would have put my queen there, they take my horse, I take theirs, then they would have took my queen. You understand? And so they would have still kept their queen, and the only thing I would have got out of that exchange was a horse. So I'm not swapping my queen for a horse. So bow, I push my pawn up instead. They move their horse, threatening this pawn right here, but it's already backed up right there by the pawn right here on the black square. So boom, I push my queen up. I'm now protecting my knight where they're threatening the knight, and they're going to now move their other knight out, putting double pressure. They're pressuring with their knight, they're pressuring with their queen. It's now my move. I'm going to push my pawn up 2 squares, also protecting my pawn with my bishop here diagonally on this open foul, right? So I have my pawn here protecting the knight. I have my queen here protecting the knight, and on my pawn, all the pieces are powerful and matter. Now, what they're trying to see is if I'm going to be foolish enough to swap my queen for their queen. They want to get the queens off the board, and they're offering a swap. I ain't going for it. Get that queen out of here. So I push my pawn up, and they're going to, of course, move back to their original position, putting pressure back on the knight, which is all they wanted to do anyway. They just wanted to see if I was going to swap. No, I ain't. I'm starting to create this beautiful defense in the center of the board that I didn't even notice until it was done. And I didn't do it on purpose, but I'm going to do it on purpose going forward. So I thought about my next move. I want to make sure I put pressure on their knight right here. However, before I move my pawn up, I need to protect that pawn, because if I don't, they have their other knight sitting right here. And what they would do is just take my pawn and then put pressure on my queen, and I'm losing the center of the board. I don't want to do that. So first I'm going to push this pawn up right here. This one's going to go up the square. Then they're going to move and push their pawn up there. I can push my pawn up, and this is the defense that I'm talking about. It looks like something designed by Phil Jackson. Do you see the triangle? Yes. There's a beautiful triangle. I have 3 pawns here, and at the head of that, I have my knight, and then I have 3 pawns there. I didn't plan for this. It just happened, and I love this positioning of dominating the middle of the chessboard. I'm going to recreate this as much as possible going forward. So now it is their move, and I have a beautiful triangle defense. And in my mind, I'm like, I'm not moving any of these pieces to break up this triangle. I'm going to work within this triangle and dominate this whole game. I'm dominating the center of the board. If you look, their pieces are pretty much just all of where they started, except for a few scattered pieces here and there. So now they move obviously they're going to move their knight out of harm's way, so I couldn't take it right here because I would have took it. So they moved, boom. And I moved my knight here. Now that move I thought about for a while. Actually, it took me a few moments because I see an open foul here straight ahead where I can dominate, and I can potentially get a checkmate straight down the middle of the board. And that's exactly what I want to do. So before I can open up this foul, I need to move my knight that's here out of the way. But if I move that knight, they're going to swap the queen with me because they already tried to offer a swap here. So as soon as I move that, they would take my queen and then I would take theirs. After they put me in check, I would have to take their queen to get out of check with my bishop. But I don't want to swap queens. So I want to move my horse to open up the foul. So I have to put a piece in front of my queen, and that's why I put the bishop there. So now I can move my horse freely, and they can't take my horse, and they're not going to swap their queen for a bishop, right? So boom, they move their horse back, keep it, and use it to set up whatever. So I see an open foul here. I move to the open foul. Again, I don't want to break up my triangle. So I'm thinking of moves that I can make without moving any of these pawns and breaking up the triangle. So I move my bishop here on this open foul, and it's now their move. They push their castle up to my queen on the open foul along with my bishop, or along with my bishop. Now I'm thinking ahead, and I want to actually move my horse that's right here at the crown of this triangle. I want to move it out the way and start to dominate this open space. I'm now protecting my bishop that's right here. So when I move my horse, my queen is also protecting my bishop, so they can't just take a free piece and put my king in check. So now it's their move. They move their horse back right there. And so what I chose to do, I have two options. I can castle and get my castle to the center of the board, or I can move my horse here. So I just chose to move my horse because in two moves, I could actually put pressure too on their castle here. I can go here, then go here, and then I would be putting pressure on their castle there. They see that, so they push their pawn up, right? So now I'm going to go ahead and castle. I'm castling so I can bring my castle to the middle of the board. They're going to now push their pawn up. Now, I thought that they would do this 2 moves ago right here, either this pawn or this pawn. I thought they would put it on the horse. But because I moved my horse right here, they didn't. They pushed it past that space there where they could have threatened my horse. So now, once I did this, I castled. Now they're going to use this one to put the pressure there to get me to move my horse, which I was going to do anyway, voluntarily. So I retreat, which is what I was looking to do. And there's no way that they're going to trade their queen for a bishop. They're not going to do that, right? Well, they did, which surprised me. They took my bishop, put my king in check, basically swapping their queen for my bishop, which I didn't understand. But then when you look at it, they didn't have any choice. They were going to lose their queen either way it went. So this was actually a pretty smart move for them. They're making the best of a worst case scenario. They're going to lose their queen in a couple of moves anyway. So they're like, they decided to take a more powerful piece. If they didn't take my bishop here, all I was going to do is move my rook, my castle right here to the middle of the board, and then move my bishop back to the white square right here. And I was going to put their king in check if they would have moved their queen to the side. But if they didn't, once I moved my castle there, they wouldn't have been able to move their queen. It would have been stuck and I would have took it anyway. So instead of them losing their queen altogether or swapping it for the castle, they took the bishop because the bishop is a more powerful piece than the rook. So I take their queen for my bishop, which I'm happy to do, and put their king in check. They move the bishop there to stop the check. And I go ahead and get this open foul that I wanted to get anyway. I still kind of have my triangle, but I just don't have the horse there at the top. But because of that triangle, I'm now dominating. I have this open foul going there, but more importantly, I have this open foul straight down the middle to put them in checkmate. I mean, I'm a move away from putting them in checkmate right now if they don't make some very great defensive moves. Their move, they put their next move is to put the bishop right there, and their horse is protecting that. So if I were to bring my queen here now, they would gladly swap their bishop for my queen. I see that trap. I'm not going for it. So what I'm going to do is push my pawn up. The reason I push my pawn up is because my bishop is right here. So if they take that, which they really don't have a choice, because if they don't check it, the game is over. If they don't take this pawn, and if they try to move their bishop, an unexperienced person would have did that, like just move their bishop out the way, and then I would have came straight down with my queen. Game would be over. So they have to take this bishop, and or they have to take that pawn and give up their bishop. And so I gladly took their bishop for a pawn. I'll do that all day. Now I'm right back to threatening this checkmate. So what do? They move their horse here. Instead of moving it right there, which I would have just taken their horse, they moved it to where they're protecting their bishop. If I were to try to come get that checkmate, they would take my queen. Okay, solid move. Now I have a couple options. I could take their horse with my bishop and probably end the game right here anyway. But what I decided to do instead of giving up my bishop right there is I move my horse, offering a swap right here, because they got to do something. They're going to have to swap for horse here, or the game is over. If they don't, I'm going to take the horse and checkmate them anyway. So, of course, they go ahead and swap them out. Boom. Now I'm about to get this checkmate, right? Well, they move their next horse down in the same position to protect the bishop again. And now I'm in the same position. I can take their horse with my bishop, and then they're going to take it with their pawn. I just don't like the sound of that right now. So instead of doing that, I'm going to push my pawn up. I think I just made the game a little bit longer. I should have took that piece. But in any case, boom, here we are. So it's their move. They move the horse here, right, to where it's blocking the check and protected by their pawn right there. My next move, I go ahead and I take their horse. They're going to push their pawn up right here. And this is where I decide, okay, let's go ahead and move forward. I take this pawn there, knowing that they're going to take my bishop, but it doesn't really matter because now the game is over. Checkmate. And that is a checkmate. Checkmate.